Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. Now, can you believe I've had my handy long-termer, the Toyota RAV4 plug-in hybrid, for over 3 months, and I've covered 6,000 miles. And in this video, I want to give you my impressions of the car after that period of time. I've also got a very special announcement about merchandise, but before any of that, if you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you know of new videos hitting the channel. But yes, let me tell you a little bit more about the RAV4. Now then, before I give you my impressions of the RAV4, let me introduce my new range of merchandise. Now, for long-term subscribers to the channel, I'm sure you'll know I was working with Control and Shift until the back end of last year when they stopped trading. But I am actually continuing to work with Jonathan from Control and Shift and my good friends at Legacy Legends, who I've been working with now for the last 12 to 18 months. They're the guys behind the amazing range of motorsport-inspired mugs. It's my personal collection on the bonnet of this car. And we've changed the range a little bit. We've simplified it, so we've just got 4 different types of design. We've got 3 t-shirts and finally, much requests for a polo shirt. But the other thing, these aren't screen printed, they are actually embroidered. So a slightly thicker t-shirt with an embroidery. I've got a new logo on that one as well. I've got a range of car stickers in different colours because I know many of you like that. And then maybe the bit I'm most excited about. As you can see, I love my range of Legacy Legends mugs, but check these bad boys out. Yes, so I am so chuffed with these 2 different Petrol Ped Legacy Legends mugs. So I will put a link in the description below to Legacy Legends where you can find all of this merchandise. Head on over there and have a look. Massive shout out to my good mate and photographer buddy Nick Williams, who took the photographs that we've used on the website. I absolutely love those as well. But hopefully you like the merch as much as I do. But let me tell you a little bit about this car, and I think we're going to start with practicality. So let's start my quick chat about my experiences of the last 3 months or so with the RAV in the boot. And I have a slight wardrobe change as well. So one of my favourites is a kind of Gulf-inspired logo on this particular t-shirt. But I wanted to start this film in the boot because the practicality of this car is one of its standout features for me. And it's not a massive car. It's clearly a compact SUV format. It's not as big as something like the Sorento I had last year, which was a 7-seater. This is a 5-seater, but it does have a really good sized boot. And if you drop the seats, I've quite often had my bike in the back when I go up and cycle at the motor circuit. You don't have to take the wheels off and the bike goes straight in. Absolutely no worries whatsoever. I've done tip runs, I've taken large amounts of stuff away at Christmas. It's just a very, very practical car. Now, the dogs do travel in the back sometimes if we're just going to the beach for a walk. What I would say is if you had a bigger dog, I don't know, Labrador size, you probably want to invest in a proper dog guard, I think. These 2 aren't really big enough to jump into the back of the car. And if we were going away for a longer period of time, like a holiday, normally we would put all the luggage in the boot. And these 2, you like sitting on the back seat with your harnesses on, don't you? So a very, very practical car. If you had a family and you wanted a really good, comfortable car to do long distance journeys and have the practicality of a good amount of boot space, that's definitely for me where the RAV sits. And it's not too big, too overwhelming in size to have problems at things like supermarket car parks, or if you went into a tight village, or if you were looking at something like a really narrow country lane. This car doesn't feel overwhelmingly big, yet it still has a lot of practicality. So big, big tick on the practicality front. My main criticism actually of this end of the car anyway is this, the power tailgate. And I know this sounds like a real first world problem, but the power tailgate on this car is too slow. It is the slowest opening tailgate in the world. And that might not sound like a big problem, but the challenge is if you get somewhere and you get whatever it is out of the boot of the car and you push that button to close the boot, it takes such a long time to close. You know, you're walking off and you're kind of waiting for the car to kind of be locked so that you can then remotely lock it with your key fob. It's just a real pain. So yeah, you probably need to speed up that tailgate by, I don't know, 30%, 40% quicker, and it would be much, much better. Now, very often in reviews, I jump in the back seat of a car and I sit there and I check the legroom. And that's pretty much the only time I ever sit in the back of the car. And I have to admit, for the 3 months I've had this car, I haven't actually been a rear seat passenger. However, we have had plenty. And in fact, just this weekend, we had some friends staying and we took the dogs to the beach in the car, and the 2 adults sat in the back and Tracy and I sat in the front, and this car has loads of room. I mean, the leg room especially is very impressive. You sit here and it's just a really, really roomy place. I think the pan roof, I'm a big fan of pan roofs, I'm sure you know that by now, but it does make the cabin very light and airy. But it's just a very, very nice place to sit. The other thing is you've got heated seats in the back for those chilly winter drives. But yeah, really, really nice and practical. You have got the normal kind of things, the sort of little armrest with drinks holders in the back. But I would quite happily do a long journey in here, even as someone with a 6'3", very long legs. It's a really practical car. And I think that, coupled with the size of the boot, just makes the RAV4 really, really useful. So I don't really have a great deal to criticize the rear passenger room of the car. It's just a really, really nice place to be. And the trim and the fit and finish of this particular model, with the seats and the way they've been dressed, and certainly the kind of leather work on the doors, the really nice kind of chunky feel to the handles, just makes you feel like you're sat in a really premium product. And by the way, another wardrobe change. I've now got my white tee on. Very, very stylish, don't you think? Okay, final costume change, and I've got my new logo on. I've just simplified the logo a little bit, and I'm really, really happy with how it's turned out. But you can choose the t-shirts in different colors and different logos, so head on over to the link I'll put in the description below and have a look. But let me talk to you a little bit about the miles I've driven in this car. As I said, 6,000 now. Aesthetically, from the outside, I've really grown to like this car. And in this particular spec, we actually have nicknamed the car the Stormtrooper, because if you look at it from the front, it just looks like a Stormtrooper's helmet. But I was washing the car today, and even though I've had it 3 months, I've not noticed that the black on the roof pillars and on the roof, if you look really carefully, when it's clean and the sun is shining, it has a really beautiful, deep kind of blue fleck in it. It reminds me a little bit of the paint colour Enigmatic Black on a Mini. It's very, very beautiful. And then the white has this deep pearlescence to it. Very difficult to get on camera, unfortunately, but when the car's clean and the sun's shining, it absolutely pops. And I've really grown to like this car in this particular spec. But in terms of the way it drives, I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about, if you like, how I've learned to live with the hybrid drivetrain and how I utilize it. So I think first thing, when you get in the car and turn it on, it defaults to running as an electric vehicle. Now, experience over the time we've had it, at a full battery charge, you're going to get about 35 to maybe 38 miles showing as indicated range, pure EV. And you can run at that pure EV up to the national speed limit. It will actually do more than that, but it will quite happily cruise on a motorway at 70 miles an hour as an electric car. Clearly, the faster you go, the less range you're going to have. That mode of running for us is your local driving. So if you're nipping to the shops and back, for Tracy going to work and back, you just leave it in EV. We've got a charger at home, and you know, stick it on that every couple of days. And actually, if you're just doing local trips, you'll probably never fire up the petrol engine at all. It's really, really useful. My comment would be, ideally, I'd like that range to be more. I think a hybrid with maybe 70, 80 miles worth of range, maybe a little bit more, would be much, much more usable. Now, I appreciate the downside of that would be it's going to be heavier because you need a bigger battery pack and so on. But I just think it would expand the EV envelope of the car a little bit more and make it a little bit more useful. If you're going to go on a longer journey, first things first, and it's happened a couple of times, if you just set off on the journey because you've got your mind on other things, it will start as an EV and you will run that battery pack down. And when it gets down, it doesn't run out completely, but when it gets down to its kind of lowest state of charge, it will trigger the petrol engine to fire up, and you will then run as a hybrid. but you've then got no EV only running range. It will use EV in creeping traffic and if you're maneuvering in a car park and so on, but you can't run as a pure EV. Now you can push a button down there and get the petrol engine to charge up the battery pack. I don't tend to do that very often, as it happens. I just try and make sure I manage the battery pack a little bit better. So if I'm going on a longer journey, what I would do is, as I set off, I would put the car into hybrid. It will run as a hybrid and maintain the battery charge, and then you can utilize that as and when you want to. You can either go into pure EV. If you got to a town at your destination, for example, you might want to run as an EV. The other time it's quite useful is if you're running low on petrol and you've still got 100% battery charge, you've got like an extra 30 miles. So if you want to play petrol station bingo, it's brilliant as a car to do that. Running as a hybrid, average fuel consumption over 6,000 miles is 55 miles to the gallon, which I think for a car of this size is very, very impressive. Now you can actually get that MPG to be better if you use more and more EV running. But the long-term trip on this car over the 6,000 miles we've done in it, 55 miles to the gallon. So I think that's pretty impressive. I know I've criticised the gearbox. When I first got the car, I really struggled with the high revving nature of the engine. But then, and I'll put a link to the video above, I then went off and did some research about how the gearbox actually works. And I'm now actually more impressed by the gearbox than annoyed by it, because I know how clever it is and the way it's utilising the petrol engine to be as efficient as possible. And I don't really hear that high revving nature anymore. It's very smooth. The transition when the petrol engine kicks in and when it comes off is very smooth. You'd be hard pushed sometimes to actually tell whether or not the petrol engine's fired up or not. It's that smooth. So I think if you were to look at one of these as someone who hadn't experienced an ECVT gearbox before, you might get in the car and you actually might not like it very much. My tip would be stick with it. See if you can get the car on a longer term test drive, maybe a weekend test drive, so that you can really do some miles, and then you'll start to actually, I think, appreciate the gearbox for what it's doing. So I really don't have a problem with that anymore. In terms of the cabin, and the fit and finish of the cabin is excellent. I mentioned that when I was sat in the back. The driving position is very, very good, and you've got all of the kind of gadgets and gizmos you'd want. I've got adaptive cruise control. The headlights are very good. Most of the things in here in terms of turning stuff on and off is done with a button rather than with touch screen. My biggest criticism of the car, probably of the main thing I'm not so keen on in the car, is the infotainment system. It's really, really showing its age. Now, you could argue, and I would argue, that's not a major issue because I don't actually use it. Because as soon as I get in the car, I plug my phone in and I use Apple CarPlay. It supports Android Auto as well if you're not an iPhone user. And I think most people will probably do that. And I'm a big Apple CarPlay fan. I use the navigation that's on my phone, Waze or Google Maps. You can use your music player and so on. The sound system in here is excellent. So when you are plumbing your music in through either on your phone or you're using Spotify or Amazon Music or whatever it might be, it's great. So I don't think it's a massive issue if you are going to be using Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. I think the challenge for car manufacturers going forward is the cost for them to have their own proprietary infotainment systems. It's huge. The navigation, particularly in this car, is really quite, it shows its age. So you may well find, I think, going forward that manufacturers just say, do you know what, people are going to use Apple CarPlay. We won't bother investing in it too much. We'll just make sure we support Apple CarPlay. I would quite like wireless Apple CarPlay in the car. I think a car at this price point, kind of high 40s, it should be wireless Apple CarPlay, because I'm not a big fan of having a cable. I know I could get a shorter one, but I have to physically plug it in. The upside of that is I don't have to use a wireless charge mat, and they normally overheat the phone. So there are upsides as well, but it just makes the cabin a little bit messy. But all in all, I've loved the miles I've done in this car. I've done some very long journeys, 4 or 5 hours, without any problem whatsoever. So it's a real mile muncher. And I think that coupled with all the other things. And for me, I know there is a school of thought out there, say, what is the point of a hybrid? Either have a petrol car or go full BEV, full battery electric vehicle. And actually for me, the great thing about this car being a hybrid is you get the benefit of EV running locally, but when you're on a longer journey, you don't have any range anxiety. You don't have to worry about it because you just go and fill it with fuel. But yeah, very, very interesting. Now, I've got the car for another couple of weeks. I shouldn't have had it this long. The plan with my Hendy long-termer cars isn't to have them 3 months, but actually having it that extra period of time has been very, very useful. I know what I'm getting next. I can't tell you for now. I'm going to keep that a secret. I'm very excited about what's going to replace this car in a couple of weeks. We've basically had, like I'm sure many of you have as well, just the supply of new cars is a real challenge at the moment, and my replacement car was just delayed a few weeks. So I'm very much looking forward to getting into that. I'll put links below to my videos I've done with this car if you want to have a look at those, and head on over to Legacy Legends if you want to buy some merch. But for now, I'm going to love you and leave you on that one. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come, and I'll see you on the next film. You take care, guys. Drive safe.